Travis Decker was once known as the quiet mechanic, a father who seemed ordinary in every way until the night he vanished with his children and left behind a trail of evidence that revealed something far darker than anyone in Ashwood could have imagined. In 2017, Ashwood was the kind of quiet town where people left their doors unlocked and neighbors waved at each other in the mornings. That illusion of safety shattered the day Travis Decker and his 2 children vanished. At first, no one thought it was anything more than a messy family matter. Travis had been going through a heated custody battle with his ex-wife, and whispers spread that maybe he had just taken the kids out of frustration, but as hours turned 2 days, the story changed from a domestic dispute into a case that felt stranger and darker with every new detail. The children were found 2 days later, abandoned in a gas station bathroom across the state line. They were shaken but unharmed, wearing the same clothes they had left home in. The employees at the gas station reported that a man matching Travis's description had pulled in late at night, walked the children to the restroom, and then disappeared into the darkness without buying gas or food. His truck was discovered soon after, sitting on a remote back road just outside of town. The license plates had been removed, and the inside had been wiped almost spotless, as if someone had taken the time to scrub away fingerprints and hair. There was no trace of Travis himself. The community was stunned. This wasn't the picture they had of the man they thought they knew. Travis had grown up in Ashwood, attended the local high school, worked for years as a mechanic at a small garage on Main Street. To most people, he was just a quiet, dependable father. The sudden disappearance clashed with everything they thought they understood about him. Yet the evidence suggested that his actions weren't impulsive at all. They looked planned. Rumors began swirling almost immediately. Some claimed they had seen him at a truck stop off the interstate, slipping into the cab of an 18-wheeler. Others said he had been spotted near the border, traveling under a false name. None of the sightings were ever confirmed, but the stories kept hope alive that authorities might catch him. At the same time, fear grew in Ashwood. If he had planned this so carefully, what else was he capable of? The police searched the woods near where his truck was found, combing through brush and abandoned sheds. They found a campsite about half a mile from the road, with a burned-out fire pit and traces of food packaging. It looked like someone had stayed there for a night or two, long enough to rest before moving on. But there were no clues pointing to where he had gone next. In the months that followed, Ashwood settled into a kind of uneasy silence. The case was whispered about at diners and gas stations, always with the same question: why would Travis abandon his children like that? Some insisted he had simply lost control under pressure. Others feared it was just the beginning of something far worse. The only thing certain was that Travis Decker was gone, and his story was far from finished. The first major breakthrough came months after the truck was discovered, when investigators returned to examine every inch of it with more advanced techniques. At first glance, the interior looked empty, cleaned with meticulous care. But beneath the torn lining of the back seat, they found an object that would change the direction of the case: a hollowed-out Bible. It was dusty, its spine cracked from years of handling, but inside, where the pages should have been, was a cavity carved deep enough to hold a slim notebook. That notebook turned out to be a ledger unlike anything investigators had expected. Each page was filled with careful, coded entries. At first, the writing appeared to be a list of random numbers and letters, but forensic accountants quickly noticed the pattern. The figures matched amounts of money withdrawn from banks in neighboring counties, and the initials scrawled in the margins seemed to connect to the names of robbery victims whose cases had gone unsolved for years. The implication was clear: Travis hadn't been acting alone, and his disappearance might have been funded by criminal activity that stretched far beyond Ashwood. Alongside the ledger, fragments of paper were recovered from a different location: his backyard fire pit. At first, they looked like nothing more than ash and charred remains, but investigators pieced together enough to recognize portions of official-looking documents. The fragments carried words like medical ID and partial driver's license numbers. Forensic testing confirmed that these weren't real records but forgeries, suggesting that Travis had been preparing a series of false identities, not just for himself but potentially for others as well. The fact that he chose to burn these documents the night before his disappearance hinted at urgency. He had been covering his tracks. The discoveries fueled suspicion that Travis had access to a wider network. Investigators questioned neighbors again, and one recalled seeing Travis in his driveway late at night, hauling black trash bags into a rusted barrel and lighting them with lighter fluid. The neighbor hadn't thought much of it at the time, assuming it was yard waste. In hindsight, the timing was too precise to be coincidence. The ledger raised more troubling questions than answers. Some of the initials matched people Travis had known in town, including a former employer who had been robbed at gunpoint but never publicly connected to Travis. Other entries seemed linked to places far away counties where Travis had no obvious ties. The theory emerged that Travis might have been working as part of a larger underground network, supplying money, identities, and escape routes. To the people of Ashwood, the revelations were devastating. This wasn't simply a case of a desperate father running away with his children. The ledger suggested planning, organization, and possibly years of secret involvement in crimes no one had associated with him. For investigators, it meant the search was no longer confined to a man on the run. It had become a hunt for the hidden infrastructure that allowed him to vanish so effectively. When investigators recovered a discarded phone from a pawn shop nearly a year after Travis vanished, they did not expect it to yield much. The device was old, its screen cracked, and the battery barely held a charge. Yet once digital forensics experts examined it, they discovered something unsettling. Buried deep within the phone's storage were 9 encrypted audio files. The encryption was basic but deliberate, as if Travis had wanted them hidden but not impossible to uncover. Once decrypted, the contents shifted the narrative of who he was and what he had been planning. The first file contained only a low, distorted hum, but within it, experts identified faint background noise, the sound of children's voices, and the rumble of an engine. It was recorded during the time his children were missing, proving he had kept the phone with him while on the move. The second file was clearer, consisting of a list of names. Investigators quickly recognized them as individuals connected to his custody case, judges, attorneys, and even relatives who had testified against him. Next to several names, single words were muttered: silence, repay, unfinished. These weren't just recordings. They sounded like outlines of intentions. The third and fourth files were more cryptic. One included strings of numbers that investigators later matched to GPS coordinates across rural counties. When searched, most of these coordinates led to abandoned farmhouses, structures long forgotten. Each location was within a short drive of where the children had been found, making investigators wonder if Travis had been using them as safe houses or waypoints during his escape. The fourth file mentioned supplies and food, water jugs, fuel spoken in a cold, methodical tone. It suggested preparation, not panic. The fifth and sixth recordings were perhaps the most disturbing. In one, Travis spoke about taking back what was mine while referencing the town after harvest. Investigators noted that Ashwood was surrounded by farmland, its entire economy tied to seasonal harvests. The phrase carried an ominous weight, as if he had been planning to return under specific circumstances. Another recording contained nothing but the sound of breathing, slow and deliberate, lasting over 7 minutes. Analysts debated whether it was a mistake or a message in itself. By the seventh file, the pattern became darker. He listed highways and gas stations, mentioning how many exits each had, how many cameras were visible, and where blind spots existed. It was as though he had been studying routes not just for travel, but for evasion, planning for scenarios where he might need to disappear again at a moment's notice. The eighth recording unsettled investigators most of all. In a flat voice, Travis said the words, "Ashwood isn't safe after the harvest." The phrase echoed from earlier, but this time felt like a direct threat, one that suggested he had unfinished business with the town itself. The ninth file remains locked, protected by a password that has resisted every attempt to break it. It is simply labeled with the letter K. No one knows if it contains the final piece of his plan, a confession or something far more dangerous. Its existence looms over the case, a reminder that Travis Decker may have left behind secrets that have yet to surface. When authorities reopened the search for Travis years after his disappearance, they shifted focus to the family he had left behind. Investigators returned to his estranged brother, a man who had kept his distance during the custody battle but who still possessed old photographs and belongings from their childhood. Among a box of worn albums and loose snapshots, one picture immediately drew attention. It showed Travis standing in the backyard with his children, both of them barely tall enough to reach his waist. Holding rifles in their small hands, behind them, nailed to the shed wall, was a crude hand-drawn map of Ashwood. Certain areas were circled in thick marker, including school zones, the courthouse, and the police station. At first glance, it looked like a child's doodle, but in context, it felt deliberate, a chilling suggestion that Travis had been planning something larger than escape. The brother admitted that Travis had grown increasingly paranoid in the years before vanishing. He claimed Travis spoke often about enemies and betrayal, convinced that people in town were plotting against him. But investigators wanted more than stories. They conducted a search of the brothers' property, and in a wooded corner behind the house they found something buried in a rusted ammunition box. Inside were several loose human teeth wrapped in paper towels. DNA testing later confirmed they did not belong to any of Travis's known relatives. Their origin remains unexplained, deepening the mystery of just how far his activities had stretched. Not long after, a former co-worker came forward with new information. He revealed that Travis had rented a storage unit under a false name during the months leading up to his disappearance. The unit was eventually located, abandoned, and overdue on payments. When investigators pried it open, they discovered rows of chemical containers, many of them matching compounds commonly used to create small-scale explosives. Some were partially used, others unopened, all of them hazardous. There were also scraps of wiring and circuit boards, as if someone had been experimenting. The unit suggested that Travis wasn't just preparing to disappear, he might have been preparing for violence. Additional searches uncovered more subtle but equally disturbing items. Investigators located survival manuals, hunting gear, and old military surplus clothing stored among his belongings. Hidden inside one of the jacket pockets was a folded piece of paper containing another hand-drawn map, this one extending far beyond Ashwood. It marked highways, abandoned service roads, and potential shelter sites across several states. The level of detail pointed to someone who had not only thought about leaving but had mapped an entire strategy for movement and concealment. Together, these findings transformed the public image of Travis. He was no longer seen simply as a father caught in a bitter custody dispute. The photographs, the buried teeth, the chemicals, and the maps revealed a man who had prepared extensively, who seemed to thrive on secrecy, and who left behind traces of something far more sinister than anyone in Ashwood had ever imagined. Hunters roaming deep in the Appalachian woods stumbled upon a weathered cabin in late 2024. From the outside, it looked ordinary. A sagging structure with broken shutters and moss crawling up the siding, but once authorities entered, they realized it was far from abandoned. Dust coated the floor in uneven patches, interrupted by fresh footprints. Inside the single room, the air was thick with the smell of mildew and kerosene. On the table, scattered across the surface, were scraps of clothing and a faded flannel shirt that matched the one Travis Decker had been last seen wearing. Pinned to the wooden walls were dozens of Polaroid photographs. Each image captured a different place: dimly lit gas stations, stretches of empty highway, and the exteriors of small diners across the Midwest. The photos had no dates or captions, but investigators pieced together a pattern. They weren't random snapshots. Each one was taken at locations where unconfirmed sightings of Travis had been reported over the years. It was as though he had been documenting his journey, leaving behind a visual map of his movements. More unsettling was the possibility that the photos had been left intentionally, like taunts to anyone still searching for him. On the floor, written in black marker that had bled into the wooden boards, were the words, "Only 9 left to go." The meaning of the phrase has never been decoded. Some speculated it referred to 9 individuals he blamed for his downfall, connecting back to the names in his recorded messages. Others believed it marked 9 locations, perhaps 9 safe houses or 9 unfinished steps in a broader plan. Whatever the case, the words transformed the cabin from a hiding spot into a message, one that hinted at something far from over. Scattered across the shelves were empty food cans, lanterns, and several knives, their blades dulled from use. Beneath a loose floorboard, investigators uncovered a small lockbox containing foreign currency, multiple license plates, and a stack of train schedules. This suggested that Travis had not only thought about how to travel across state lines, but had considered moving beyond the country entirely. Each object spoke to careful planning, not desperation. Forensic teams combed the cabin for DNA, and while no conclusive traces of Travis were found, several hairs matched neither animals nor any of the hunters who discovered the place. The timeline suggested someone had been there recently, perhaps only weeks before the hunters' arrival. The cabin quickly became the most significant physical lead in years, a concrete reminder that Travis was not just a figure of rumor, but someone still out there, still moving, still planning. For the people of Ashwood, the discovery reignited old fears. The ledger, the audio files, the storage unit, and now the cabin all painted the same picture. A man who had not simply run from his problems, but who had cultivated a life in the shadows, building something no one could fully understand. Each new clue only deepened the uncertainty, leaving a trail of unanswered questions that seemed to stretch further with every step.